You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
So, Mark, I've got a seasonal stack waddy, as is traditional this time of year, as our thoughts turn towards the festive season. We think about these 5 seasonal records and try to decide which of the 5 I invented. Okay?
Yeah, go on.
Here we go. Lou Reed, Christmas in February. De La Soul, Millie pulled a pistol on Santa. Fall Out Boy, you'll shoot your eye out. Sonic.
Hang on a second. Fall Out Boy, was it you'll shoot your eye out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sonic Youth, Santa don't cop out on dope. An old dirty bastard, Santa's in the clan. Okay? Which of those 5 is an invention and which 4 are real?
I'm convinced that I've heard the old dirty bastard song. I'm sure that's real. I may have imagined that, but I think so. Sonic Youth, Santa don't cop out on dope. Was that what it was called?
Yep.
Possible too. Fall Out Boy, you'll shoot your eye out. Possible. De La Soul.
Millie pulled a pistol on Santa.
See, that's possible too. They're all possible, aren't they?
And Lou Reed, Christmas in
February. All of them are completely and utterly. Do you know, I'm going to say it's Lou Reed's Christmas in February is the made up one.
Half his friends are stuffed into black body bags with their names printed at the top. Christmas in February. No, it's real. That's real.
For God's sake. Which is the fake one?
The fake one is old dirty bastard Santa's in the clan, actually.
No.
Yes.
That's the one I immediately thought I'd heard.
De La Soul.
Santa's in the clan.
De La Soul, Millie pulled a pistol on Santa. None of the kids could understand what was the cause. All they could see was a girl holding a pistol on claws. Fall Out Boy, you shoot your eye out. Don't come home for Christmas. You're the last thing I want to see. And Sonic Youth, Santa don't cop out on dope, because Santa doesn't cop out on dope. Has he even tried it? Well, you know, the answer's no. There you go. So
that's
I
fantastic.
win.
I'm completely fished in.
Absolutely.
Literally doing sit-ups on the bank.
Absolutely. I'm
Hook in mouth. Very good work.
Another thing you can do at this time of year, if like me, you use a Spotify, at the end of the year, they provide your year wrapped. You know, they provide a kind of audit of what you've listened to in the last year. So you can see at a glance what you've listened to most in the last year. And so now I'm about to do this live on the podcast. Are you ready, Mark?
Oh, this is good. Go on, yeah.
I'm about to click the little button saying, check it out. Check it out. Okay, here we go. I'm checking it out. It's redirecting me to Spotify, and it'll just take a minute to do this. It goes, hello, you. It's Wrapped time. Ready? Let's do this. 2023 was a feast for your ears. You listened to 69 genres, Mark. 69
genres.
How did your tastes stack up? Oh, they're going to give me a kind of a chart.
They're going to rate you now, are they?
No, they're going to show me. I think, okay, the category I listened to most was jazz. The second category was classical, and the next one was swing. And then it's changed. They've been replaced by another graphic now. It's now going around the world showing me which places in the world I listen to music from, I think. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, I played 3,499 songs in 2023. And these were the ones that really connected. Okay, my top song. Do you know what my top song was?
It's almost certainly going to be the Teddy Bear's Picnic, which you played your granddaughter's.
No,
go on, though.
It was Bach, Prelude in C.
No.
Yes, absolutely, my top song. Here they come.
So any regular listeners will be expecting Steely Dan or Tom Waits or Randy Newman.
Oh, these graphics keep changing. Come on. Here's a playlist of all the songs you know into your life. Oh God, it's not going to do this quick enough for me to go through it. It is mainly going to be say hello to your top artist, Johann Sebastian Bach.
That's brilliant.
And Oh, gosh, give over. Next one. You had something special with your top artist. Sorry, this is all taking far longer than I thought. It's giving me...
Bear with us, listeners.
All this kind of
We're
thing.
busking here.
Broken down. Yeah, I really am desperately busking here. And then number 2 is Count Basie. So Johann Sebastian Bach, and then Count Basie. I think I'll be doing quite well. Number 3, Leo Kottke. Leo Kottke, the great guitar player. I love Leo Kottke. Number 4, Teddy Wilson. Teddy Wilson, jazz player. Who's coming in at number 5? Fletcher Henderson and his orchestra.
That's fantastic. Fletcher Henderson. So these are above Johnny Hates Jazz, are they, David?
Just a bit.
And early Duran Duran.
Just a bit, yeah. So it's, those are the... Has anyone ever told you you're a great listener? Well, you are. You spent 4,588 minutes listening. It shows me my top podcasts. Okay, going past that. Yeah, go on, move on. One moment, please, it says. It's, we're turning off the lights. What does that mean? Good grief, I can't imagine. And it goes, that's better. The way you listened this year makes you a hero. Or maybe we should say anti-hero. Oh, dear God.
Oh, for God's sake.
People sit in offices and make up this stuff.
They've got too much time on their hands, haven't they?
They really have.
So somebody who listens to the Fletcher Henderson Orchestra, Count Basie, is a hero. Absolutely.
Yeah. So there we go. What do you have? Johann Sebastian Bach, Fletcher Henderson, Leo Kottke, Teddy Wilson, and Count Basie. There's my top stuff. And my top genre turned out to be jazz, Mark. So there you are.
See, that's revealing, isn't it? But isn't that because you're playing that stuff to work too, probably?
Yeah, it probably is.
It's stuff that's background music when you're writing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than I'm going to race upstairs now. But then again, who wouldn't want to race upstairs and put on the Count Basie Orchestra?
Absolutely. And if you haven't done it already today, do it now.
The Word Podcast. Prime cuts of popular culture served fresh each week.
Well, we're recording this on Saturday, and 2 days ago on Thursday, we had the very, very sad, I suppose not completely unexpected news that Shane MacGowan had died. And we thought we'd ask old pal of the pod, Belfast author and writer, Stuart Bailie, to chip in and give us a few thoughts about his life and art. So, Stuart, I mean, it's one of those extraordinary things where the news was announced around lunchtime on Thursday, and within, 15 or 20 minutes, enormous, very considered, very complicated obituaries had appeared, which always indicates that this is not a surprise, that these things have been written some time ago. Very sad, though.
Yeah, and I a lot of my acquaintances on social media who are close to the Pogues camp have been making bedside visits. He was released from hospital fairly recently, so the prognosis wasn't really good. I think he was a man with an enormously powerful constitution. But I think even Shane MacGowan, I think it finally gave up on him, and I think it was a fairly wretched last period of time for him. But to see pictures of Bruce Springsteen, en route to his house and sending his best and stuff and shaking his hand and stuff, that was really nice. It
was. I saw that.
People did get the chance to pay their respects at the end.
When did he first enter your life?
I would have been very... I didn't see the Nipple Erectors when they played Belfast. They played the Harp Bar in 1978, and I did know Shane MacGowan rang up the organisers and said, should I keep my head down? And Terry Hooley answered, well, you better keep your drink down. That's a bit more important, But I didn't go down as one of the all-time classic shows, but, Shane obviously was part of that very early punk set. And then I think I remember a late journalist called Gavin Martin who'd kind of been friends with Shane and said, oh, he's got this band and they're combining punk rock with folk music, and Dark Streets of London would have been the first record that a lot of us heard. And I thought he sounded like Jake Burns from Stiff Little Fingers. He had that gravelly voice, and it came out of punk, but obviously there was tin whistles and drums clattering along like Irish bodhráns, and it was an amazing record. And I think I saw them live early in '84. They came to Belfast, and they played the Crescent Arts Centre, and people just adored them. And folk music was a very kind of divisive thing in the north of Ireland, because sometimes it can be, bring the messages that not everybody wants to hear. And everybody loved the Pogues. It just cut right across that. And I think they were a little bit more, they originally called themselves the New Republicans. And that was a signal of intent, really. They were going to, suggest that Ireland was for the Irish. And they got pelted with chips. There was a bunch of squatties in Cabaret Futura, the first gig they played, and they toned it down a little bit. And I think that was the whole thing about the Pogues. There was a deal of, it was a cooperative. Jim Finer was a brilliant musician, and lots of other people kind of added their talents to it. But they kept Shane's extreme politics to a lesser level. Obviously, they came back with things like Birmingham 4 and stuff, where they were the Guildford 4, Birmingham 6. So they were singing about stuff
which
like
came
that
out about a year or two before both were released and pardoned, weren't they?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It had an enormous impact.
It wasn't just empty gestures. I think Shane knew his history, and he knew his story, and he knew the grievances that he was singing about. So the first album, I think I just arrived in London, and I arrived into the diaspora of North London, where all these lost souls were running around. And Pogues gigs were really important for finding your people and for feeling that you weren't alone. And the annual St. Patrick's Day Pogues gig, which was normally at the Town and Country, at the Forum in Kentish Town, it was like a 3-day event, really. You needed a day and a half to recover, but just every bar was just full of lost Celtic souls. And it was a beautiful thing. It was a period of mass immigration and busted social politics and all sorts of things. And Shane and the Pogues pulled it together. The first album sounded obviously like the Dubliners and the Clancy Brothers, and it was a weird throwback to the ballad boom, and a lot of cover versions on it. But also, streams of whiskey and stuff where Shane is summoning up the spirit of Brendan Behan. So, there's a literary thing going on. There's a good songwriting thing. And before you know it, it's Pair of Brown Eyes, and you're on the road to Fairytale of New York. So the second album,
so where would he, can I just ask you about that, where he might fit in the literary tradition? Because I read an amazing piece in the Irish Times where it talked about his parents talking about how that he had read Dostoevsky and Joyce, and was reading passages from Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake, and he read War and Damon Runyon and Sean Casey and T.H. Lawrence, Voltaire, Sartre, all by the age of 12. Absolutely astonishing.
Yeah.
But where do you feel that he fits in as a lyric writer in that kind of, I suppose, in the Irish tradition particularly?
Well, I think first of all, then it would have been Borstal Boy by Brendan Behan, which was that sort of rebellious soul. But and the boisterousness of it all, and that he was there from the get go. But the Joycean stuff is there. The use of language, and that those kind of floating images that go through songs like Pair of Brown Eyes and stuff is kind of Joycean, I think. And but he wore his intelligence lightly. You had to drill down very hard into Shane, and he carried that sort of slightly bemused, drunken persona almost as a barrier, really, to stop you getting through to it. But it was there, and even Fairytale of New York is a title, comes from a J.P. Dunleavy story. There's not that much connection between the book and the song, but certainly The Ginger Man by Dunleavy is almost like a Pogues song on the written word. So I think a lot of people, myself included, came to realise that there was a major, major talent there for that second album on.
So it must have been, in terms of kind of literature, he must have been almost a prodigy to have read those things at that kind of age and to have that kind of familiarity with them.
I think he was feral. I think his parents gave him a massive leeway to do what he wanted to do. So, as well as literature, there was psychedelic drugs, in his early teens, so he was kind of unfettered in a lot of ways. And, he did get into Westminster School on a scholarship and that obviously they must have sussed him out with intent, and then decided to chuck him out not long afterwards. But popular music is blessed sometimes with people with outrageous intelligence, and Shane MacGowan was in that club.
But as you say, I mean, he obviously had, nowadays we would say, addiction issues and so forth. Well, people didn't talk like that back in those days, did they? But do you just talk a bit more about that persona that he projected? It was part of him, wasn't it? It was probably a way of keeping the world at bay a bit.
I think it was, and I did quite a few kind of media journalist trips with the Pogues. I was in New York when they were making they just finished the Fairytale of New York video, and then they played 2 nights at the Ritz with Joe Strummer on guitar, and it was absolutely. I was just grinning the whole time. It was like my dream trip. But Shane sort of seemed to be this kind of slightly dopey guy. And then you would say something, I remember saying something really banal, stupid about, when music got self-conscious in the late 60s, something was lost. And he just launched into this litany of 70s singer-songwriters and writers and bands. And it wasn't like there was no delay, no response. It was like 30 names. He just threw them at me like a piece of mud, and then all of a sudden he went back to being Shane. So that there was an alert thing.
What kind of names was he mentioning?
Sorry,
what kind of names was he mentioning?
He started talking about Graham Parsons. I'm trying to remember now. It's kind of long gone, but. I'll have to have a think and get back to you. But yeah, it was, I think he mentioned Costello and he mentioned a few other names, but it was just like bang, 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 shut up, and then he became Shane, dopey Shane again. And I was utterly I was put to rights and I was quietly humiliated, but it was great. And then we just went to a Japanese restaurant and drank all the sake that they could put in front of us, and a very irate person from Stiff Records got in touch later and says, "You drank all the proceeds from Fairytale of New York." And I was like, well, why not, eh?
I don't think anybody could ever drink all the proceeds from Fairytale of New York, because they're still continuing, and they will continue for many years to come. Tell us a bit about how he's regarded in Ireland, because there are people in Irish music. I read a quote the other day saying it was the worst possible thing that could happen to Irish traditional music. I mean, was there a kind of controversy around that?
There's a preciousness about Irish music that surfaces now and again, and people who perhaps were gatekeepers of that tradition. And obviously that tradition has suffered and endured a lot and not necessarily had an easy time of it. But there was a concertina player called Noel Hill who went on television and said the Pogues were, I think he called them an abortion of folk music.
Oh.
And then about 4 months later, there was a beautiful instrumental on the flip side of a Pogues record called Planxty Noel Hill, which, a Planxty is a tribute. So it was like they kind of made their point in the most gracious manner. And Noel Hill, I think, recanted after that and said, "Oh, well, maybe I was wrong," So, sometimes a tradition likes things to be frozen in amber, and, when a band like Lankum comes along, it kind of challenges that. So every now and again, there is a rowdy arrival that makes folk music freshly relevant. And, Shane's contribution really was bringing punk and that feverishness, and later a multicultural sound, songs like Turkish Song of the Damned, became this, using Arabian scales and all sorts of stuff. They're a hugely versatile band.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. I was just saying to Mark before we started recording this, that I was listening to some Pogues records this morning, and the sound of them, there's a remarkable sound. It's
beautiful, because you're not used to hearing, a whistle, and not used to hearing banjos, not used to hearing accordions or whatever, or mandolins. And you've got all four in the same group. It's completely unlike everything else that was going on at the time.
And I think, like a lot of bands, it was almost by stealth they became good. I think obviously they became great, but at the start they almost seemed like a comedy band. And I remember the DJ. What do you call him? Simon? What was
Mayo?
What was he called?
Mayo.
Yeah. No. Who had the Your Tune thing?
Oh, Simon Bates.
Simon Bates played it and then started talking in a big Gora accent.
Oh, good grief!
And he went, "Oh, the Pogues," and obviously belittled them. And you kind of think, this isn't the proper way to kind of respond to an interesting record. And, by album 2, they were really swinging. And Cod O'Riordan, a fantastic bass player as well. Elvis Costello produced a second album and kind of took it to magnificent places. And by that stage, they're off,
Right. But his drinking and heroin addiction, it just led to them no longer being able to tolerate him in the Pogues. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I saw him in Australia. Again, dates fail me, but probably 89. And he was this kind of solitary figure where he was tolerated, but he wasn't part of the fun, and they would all go off to restaurants and eat nice food, and some of them might take in the art galleries or whatever, and Shane seemed to be.
Was he just not invited?
Then they kind of threw him out. He was missing gigs. He wasn't doing all sorts of stuff. And then I was at this John Henry rehearsal rooms where Joe Strummer had sort of stepped into the shoes to take on the lead vocals. And Shane Gate crashed the interview and was trying to talk to the band while I was doing the interview. And as a journalist, you're kind of going, I'm in this strange moment where there's a small piece of history happening, and they kind of ignored him, and he shuffled out of the room, and it was desperately sad because I think he wanted to be in the band, but hated touring and hated the kind of rigmarole that went with it. And then occasionally he would come back for the, Christmas Show Me the Money tour, but there wasn't the same heart in it,
I dug out an old copy of Q magazine from 1988 when they were on the cover. The Booze Brothers was the headline, I remember. And I was just amazed.
No stereotyping.
No. And I was just amazed. Yes, the Booze Brothers, the staggering success of the Pogues. Oh dear. Sorry. But I was just amazed by the detail about the amount of drinking that was going on then. And this was just, what is that, 35 years ago? And Shane himself, I think, he was taking stomach pills. He just had pneumonia. He was drinking port and vodka. Spider Stacy looked into something. Philip Chevron had stomach ulcers. Jem Finer had actually given up booze at that stage because he made himself so ill. So, it was genuine. He really did drink that amount, didn't he? So, in some ways, it was astonishing that he survived for so long.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes, you hear about people sort of who fall into the Rolling Stones camp, like Bobby Keys and stuff, and who just couldn't, he tried to keep up with Keith and it did him in,
Yeah.
And I think there was people who were running on that pace and their constitutions weren't that good. And there was a very black period then in the early 90s where a lot of the people around the Pogues were dying, to the crew and various people associated with them. And it became incredibly dark. And a lot of the people who worked with the Pogues had literally swapped jobs from working with Thin Lizzy. There was a moment where they died, or Thin Lizzy went off the road, and then the crew and everybody then started working for the Pogues. So it was a kind of an almost like deja vu thing.
I thought the same thing is happening again.
Yeah, and there was a few people where enthusiastically went, okay, here's our chance to party again. But I think there were other people going, "Oh no, you're breaking my heart, Shane. You know, yeah, this is what we lost Philip this way, and now we're losing you." So behind the scenes, it was terribly fractious and terribly painful a lot of the time.
It's touching that he was with eventually his wife, but Victoria Clark for 41 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an astonishing side of this story.
Well, that's a test of your loyalty, isn't it? So, and I think at the end, you know, regardless, I think a lot of bridges were rebuilt near the end, and Victoria became the keeper of the Shane name and the Shane brand. And there was a beautiful moment for his 60th birthday, which you've probably seen clips of, where they assembled everybody in Dublin, and everybody had, you know, Nick Cave and Bobby Gillespie.
Oh yeah, Bono and
Connor, and everybody had a run at those songs, and those songs will never die. You know, we're probably talking about 15 songs at least that are of a certain level. I remember Liam Clancy going to Broad Majestic Shannon, and he started reading it like a piece of poetry. And he says that Shane said it was written about me, but it was really written about Shane because it's so sad, you know. But that you're talking about 3-4 generations of musicians, right up to bands like the Mary Wallopers now, who kind of have taken inspiration from Shane.
Well, and Springsteen said the same thing, didn't he? He said, "I don't know what people are going to be listening to in 50 years' time or something."
Yeah.
But they'll
Steve
certainly
Earle
be listening
would have
to
been
the
another
Pogues.
one. You know, the Americans were going, this guy, and Tom Waits, you know, who were literally going, "I understand this," which is incredible.
Well, also Americans have a very strong connection with that kind of music, don't they? Through their American roots and Thousands of Sailing, etc.
Well, so Fairytale of New York will probably be number one this year, and probably next year as well, and far into the future. Stuart, thanks very much indeed.
This is a junction in the word podcast. It separates that bit from this next bit.
I got a surprise this week, Mark.
Go on.
John Mayall turned 90.
I know. I saw that. It's astonishing, isn't it?
Because John Mayall, I feel I ought to just explain this to younger listeners. And all our listeners are younger than us, surely. In fact, there's a test. If you're a listener who's older than we are, we want to hear from you.
Yes.
Personally.
Prove it.
Prove it. Show your birth certificate. Anyway, now I feel I ought to explain to younger listeners just what a big deal John Mayall was when I was, I don't know, 19, 20, something like that. You know, in the late 60s and early 70s. And I was kind of surprised that he was still with us, but obviously he is still with us.
Because he seemed old then, didn't he?
He was old.
Because he was
then.
obviously, we now know he was born in 1933. And so when I first remember him in 63, well, it must have been mid-60s, he would have been about 35 when he had the Blues Breakers with, you know, and all those people were in it, Clapton and John McVie and Peter Green, Jack Bruce, Mick Taylor, John Heisman. I mean, he was a very significant figure for me. I thought he was fantastic.
He was a band leader, wasn't he? Because,
yes, in a kind of jazz sense, wasn't it?
I mean, in the end, nobody could really work out what it was that John Mayall did that was remarkable. Well, the answer was he hired people, really.
Yeah.
He had a good recruitment policy, didn't he?
Yeah, because he certainly wasn't a very pronounced instrumentalist himself, and certainly not a great singer. In fact, genuinely out of tune a lot of the time. There's no doubt about that.
But he hired, you know, the likes of, I suppose, well, first of all, Eric Clapton. And, you know, so he had the famous John Mayall's Blues Breakers, which is John Mayall on keyboards and guitar, and then John McVie, yes,
John McVie, Huey Flint,
John McVie on bass, Huey Flint on the drums, and Eric Clapton reading the Beano on the
bit, which was a huge thing for me. I was 12 when that came out, and I can remember thinking, I've now put these childish things behind me, the Beano, and here is one of my great heroes reading the Beano. It's back in, it's fashionable again.
And they were playing Otis Rush's All Your Love and Double Trouble and, you know, Freddie King's Hideaway and all that kind of stuff. And they recorded that album in a decade, didn't they? Probably did it in a day. And it was just one of those records that caught on. And then Clapton moved on to Cream, didn't he? And so Peter Green came in as the kind of featured guitar player. And they made an album called, was it called Hard Road?
Yeah.
I think it was. And then he moved on and started Fleetwood Mac. And then did Mick Taylor go in as well?
Yeah, Mick Taylor was there.
Mick Taylor. So it's just one
I
after
followed
the other.
all the way through.
One after the other. And then he got tired. He went to America, didn't he?
Well, he made a really good record, I think. The one must have been after Blues from Laurel Canyon. It was called The Turning Point. Do you remember that? I adore that record. It was quite a revolutionary thing. I don't think it did very well. It was quite revolutionary at the time because it was no drums.
No.
And no big electric guitar solos. It was mostly acoustic with John Mark and
Johnny
Armand, I think, wasn't it? It's a really good record.
Yeah, he made a live album at the same time.
Yeah.
And then I kind of lost track a bit, really. But he kept on going, you know. And here he is, 90 years old. I apparently retired from playing live not that long ago.
Yeah, he retired 2 years ago. He said he was too old. But that was entirely because of lockdown. He said, I can't do it anymore, so maybe I should knock it on the head. Hadn't been for lockdown, he would have probably kept going. Yeah. Astonishing.
Did, really. Also this week, the relatively, whippersnapper age of 80, Randy Newman. Randy Newman celebrated his 80th birthday.
A lot of affection for Randy Newman.
Of course,
I always remember the interview you did with him. Must have been for Q, I think. But he talked about he'd written the soundtrack to a film. I can't remember which one it was now, which had very, very beautiful actors in it. And he goes up on stage to get an Oscar, and he said, "I was invisible." Who were the actors he was with?
I can't remember.
Can you remember? I think Catherine Ross was one of them. He said, "Nobody was looking at me."
I love Randy Newman. I've interviewed him a few times, and he's my absolute favourite person to interview. And he married twice, and so first wife he had boys, and then divorced. You know, when the children were grown up, he divorced, and then he remarried, and then he wrote a song on one of his records that he made after the divorce, all about his ex-wife. And the song was called I Miss You.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I miss you. Sorry, but I do. I miss you. Which I thought, that's a brilliant thing to do. That is, you know.
It really is.
It's so unlike what anybody else would do.
Yeah.
You know? And the funny thing about him is that, you know, the kind of the critical view of Randy Newman is that he's kind of this acid commentator on human frailties, and yet when you go and look at on Spotify, what's his most popular song? You've Got a Friend in Me from the soundtrack. The soundtrack of Toy Story. I think the top 5 songs, top 5 most popular songs on Spotify of Randy Newman are these 5 just really kind of sweet ballads that anybody can apply to.
This is going to sound very corny, but the first Randy Newman song I was aware of, and I would have been about, 12 or 13 when it came out, was Simon Smith and His Amazing Dancing Bear.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which was the Alan Price version of it, and which I thought Alan Price had written, actually. And I thought it was a really good song because it so caught the kind of mood of psychedelic whimsy at the time. But I was reading something he wrote about it, and he said, which I didn't know actually. You'll know. He said he was writing a song. The song was for Frank Sinatra Jr., and it was called something like Susie or Mary. And all of a sudden, I just couldn't do it, and I ended up somewhere with coat to wear, rhyming with dancing bear. And then the song was never the same. He said, and I was never the same. He said, I never wrote particularly conventional songs after that. So he went off at this tangent and then took the song away from being about this girl, being about a dancing bear. Really interesting.
That's a song that's got the line, was it, they're lovers, don't they? They feed us, won't they?
Won't they? That's right.
Oh,
Playing at the finest, seen at the finest places where well-fed faces stop and stare.
Stop to stare.
Yeah.
Making the grandest
entrances, Simon Smith and his Dancing Bear.
I had lunch.
I may go out tomorrow if I can borrow a coat to wear.
Oh, I stepped out in style.
with my
sincere smile
and my dancing bear.
And my dancing bear.
That's right. My sincere smile.
Sincere smile. I had lunch with Randy Newman at the Hyde Park Hotel when it was still called the Hyde Park Hotel, a very splendid place overlooking Hyde Park, the dining room overlooking Hyde Park. It was just after the normal lunchtime. So there was me, Randy Newman, and Mark Knopfler seated at this table with this crisp white tablecloth and this gleaming silverware and glassware and so forth, having some salmon or whatever it was. And it was a sunny day outside. And down the road on the side of Hyde Park came a troop of the household cavalry, mounted on horseback, sun glinting on their kind of their headgear or whatever. I've never forgotten that. And every time I hear that Elvis Costello song, London's Brilliant Parade, I think of that.
Perfect.
Because London just does that very occasionally to you. And Randy Newman just looked at this like he couldn't believe it.
Yeah. The American would have thought they just landed in a movie. They've done this just for me.
They've done this just for me. And if they hadn't, they should have.
The Word Podcast, 2 cocoa tins and a piece of string.
In other news this week, Spinal Tap, the reunion movie, which I'm immensely enthusiastic about. I know you're not, but I like the idea that these guys have sat and thought about this for ages and they don't want to get it wrong. I can't think of an example of a sequel that more people want to succeed because they're so fond of the original. And amazingly, the vast majority of the key players are all alive. Rob Ryan is still alive, Michael McKean and Christopher Guest, Harry Shearer. Tony Hendra, of course, isn't, who played
the manager. Yeah,
and Doris Patrick McNee, but nor Fred Willard, actually, I can't think of it. But the idea is that that Ian Faith dies in the fictional world, and his widow is given a contract which stipulates that the band have to reform and play another concert, which is actually interesting. Is exactly the same structure, isn't it, as Waiting for Guffman, as Best in Show, and as The Mighty Wind, because all three of those, it's a brilliant idea, are all geared round to a load of people rehearsing, getting ready for one big performance. So that structure will really suit it, I think. And I've got to say, I'm looking forward to it immensely.
Well, I wish them all well, because obviously nobody made any money at the first one, I don't think at all. And so part of the reason for coming back and doing this as a streaming thing or whatever.
They made some money touring as a band, I think, didn't they? They did. They probably wouldn't have been faster bands.
It wouldn't have been. It wouldn't have been commensurate with the kind of stature of the film. Do you know what I think about Spinal Tap? Is it's a brilliant joke that we carry around in our head, and it's at its best in our head. It's all the jokes that spin off from it, going up to 11,
Yeah.
None More Black, all those kind of things. There's no encounter with a rock band where you don't naturally think about Spinal Tap. It's in your head. It's a joke that was put in your head all those years ago, and you carry it around with you in order to make you laugh. And it does that splendid job.
Why so many musicians, when they first saw it, didn't really like it that much, because it was so near the bone, wasn't it? They found it upsetting.
But you see, I don't actually, whenever I sit down and watch it nowadays, I never find it all that interesting. Whereas the Christopher Guest films that I love and watch again and again, Best in Show, Waiting for Guffman, they're just those beautiful, gentle little
But they're
films.
about something completely different.
I know, but all I'm saying is I go back to those films again and again and again and absolutely love them.
Yeah.
I sort of don't need to go back to Spinal Tap because I've got the joke in my head, you know what I mean? And I get value from the joke all the time.
Well, those other two films are far, far broader and far deeper because they're just about different types of people and they're about human interaction, aren't they? Whereas actually Spinal Tap's only about being in a rock and roll band. That's the entire concept of the whole thing. So you get, there's a lot more resonance in the other. But I'm rooting for them.
Well,
Prove me wrong.
Mark Allen, no, best of luck to everybody. Mark Allen's bought his ticket already.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.